Hello and welcome to The Point. I'm your host, Lee Hyun. It has been a year since South Korea's President Moon Jae-in declared the Korean New Deal as the nation's blueprint for the future. On the 14th of July, the South Korean government unveiled an enhanced version of the policy, which is being referred to as the Korean New Deal 2.0. What achievements have been gained by this ambitious initiative since its launch last year? And how does this upgraded version of the Korean New Deal differ from the previous model? Today, we will endeavor to provide you with an in-depth analysis of this important issue. Let's get to the point.
국민 여러분, 한국판 뉴딜은 대한민국 대전환의 문을 힘있게 열었습니다. 디지털 혁신과 그린 혁신의 바람을 일으키고 포용의 힘을 더욱 키웠습니다.
핵심은 2.0은 1.0이 중에 사회 안전망 분야를 휴먼 뉴딜로 바꾼 것입니다. 사람에 대한 투자를 강화하는 거죠.
Now, in the studio with us today is Professor 최지은 from Seoul National University's Graduate School of International Studies, who is also a senior economist at the World Bank. Professor Choi, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Later in the program, we will connect live with Professor Raj Bala, who is a distinguished professor at the University of Kansas School of Law. Professor, thank you for making time for us today.
It's an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Now let's begin our discussion with you, Professor Choi. As you know, the Korean government has been actively implementing the Korean New Deal since July of last year. Would you tell us the reasons why the Korean New Deal was formulated in the first place?
Sure. In the first place, Korean New Deal started off as a strategy to create a lot of jobs to fight against COVID-19 crisis. COVID-19 caused economic crisis, but it reflects many other issues, such as a changing global environment, such as digital transformation and also green technologies. So parallel to the U.S. President Roosevelt signature program in 1930s, the Korean New Deal include the government fiscal expansion in investing in digital and green technology to reflect the changing environment, and at the same time it aimed to recover the economic crisis.
Right. Now, you referred to, of course, the aspects of the different pillars, the digital New Deal as well as the Green New Deal. So could you tell us a little bit about what accomplishments have been made thus far and what advancements have been made in these areas?
Sure. Under the Korean New Deal program, the government expanded its fiscal investment in a variety of issues. As you mentioned, the Green New Deal is one pillar of the program. Under the Green New Deal, the government expanded its fiscal packages to promote sustainable energies and also pave the way to going to the carbon neutrality. And then it aims to achieve the 2050 the carbon zero society. But under digital technology, it expanded even more programs, such as big data, establishing a data dam, and also establishing many schools to promote the software developer. And also, it tried to reduce the digital divide between the rural and urban areas and between those rich family and the poor family by promoting digital education to the young youth, particularly in the vulnerable areas. And also, it promoted digital education to elderly citizens as well. So it also bought a lot of smartphones or new medias in the schools. So those has been a lot of achievement. I think that helped the Korea going through the economic crisis. And by 2021, Korea would expected to be 10th largest economy in the world. And I think the government fiscal expansionary policy, such as the Korean New Deal, contributed to that.
Right. Well, given all of these accomplishments, apparently the Korean New Deal has been well received by various world leaders as President Moon has been visiting the G7 summit as well as other nations. So would you tell us what has been the perspective of the foreign press as well as the international community in reacting to the Korean New Deal?
Sure. I think there's much interest in Korean New Deal by international community and foreign press. I read a number of the interviews or articles on Korean New Deal by the foreign media and foreign press, and they particularly liked the idea that Korea had a long-term plan. Korea tried to shift the current crisis to the opportunity by investing in medium and long-term plan. And a similar praise has been provided also by international organizations. For instance, IMF mentioned that a large fiscal expansion, such as the Korean New Deal, would help Korean economy to recover from the COVID crisis. At the same time, it created as a driver of the growth for Korean economy for the medium term. And I think the similar praises has received from OECD as well.
I see. Well, it's now time to invite Professor Bala to our discussion. Professor, South Korea has been implementing its Korean New Deal policy, which includes the Digital New Deal and Green New Deal to recover from the COVID pandemic since last year. Do you think that this initiative has contributed to the recovery of the South Korean economy?
Well, thank you for that excellent question. I think the answer is that it is too early to tell, and there are going to be questions of causation. The signs are good. Korea's gross domestic product is forecast to grow at 4%. That would be the fastest in a decade since 2010, when it was 6.8%. We know that exports have increased April 2020 year on year by 41.1%. And happily, the Bank of Korea has been able to maintain its monetary policy at an unchanged benchmark of 0.5% interest rate, because it's looking at only an inflation rate of 1.8%. But the Korean New Deal was launched only a year ago and relaunched only a week ago. I think we also have to be quite granular in our analysis. We have to look, for example, at when we think of the increase in exports or the increase in corporate investment, we have to ask, has it been in green technology, or has it been in old world carbon-intensive goods? And we don't yet have that data.
Right. From this latest iteration of the Korean New Deal, a new initiative dubbed the Human New Deal was introduced to support young people and those who have been traditionally neglected. What is your evaluation of the Korean New Deal 2.0?
Well, I think the theory is wonderful. We know from some of the great Nobel Prize-winning 20th century economists, Simon Kuznets, Gary Becker, that human capital is the ultimate resource. And the Human New Deal is trying to complement the 1.0 version of the Korean New Deal with greater investment in job training and education and childcare support. It's trying to address income inequality. It's trying, in a word, to make growth inclusive. So the theory is wonderful, but we have to see how things work in practice and how the theory comes up against cultural, long-standing cultural barriers. Growth has to be inclusive, otherwise it's not sustainable. More attention is going to be paid to just how inclusive is this growth effort, and does it address the long-standing invisible cultural barriers that have traditionally been impediments to inclusive, sustainable growth.
I see. Well, South Korea is making a considered effort to step up as a global leader. Do you think the Korean New Deal 2.0 will help drive the South Korean economy and raise its international reputation?
I think so, and I certainly hope so. Korea's New Deal, both the initial version and the 2.0 version, are entirely consistent with the plan that the European Union just released a few days ago, known as Fit for 55. And they are also entirely consistent with the Biden administration's aspirations for U.S. infrastructure, both physical and human infrastructure development. Thus, very, very much in line with the efforts of other major G7 and G20 countries. So I certainly hope that this initiative boosts Korea's international stature. I would add that to some extent, it's rather in the hands of, frankly, American educators like myself to apprise our population of how much we can indeed learn from Korea. Because frankly, there is a sizable percentage of the electorate in the United States that does not pay sufficient attention to what is happening in Korea.
I see. Well, South Korea has started accelerating its turnaround from COVID while the world is, as you know, still experiencing the impacts of the pandemic. What is your advice to South Korea to continue its advancement forward?
Well, let me offer 4 possibilities. One is in the short and medium term, obviously stay vigilant against the coronavirus variants. There are risks of breakthrough infections. Second, keep talking with young people. Keep consulting with them. What makes them happy? What makes them feel inclusive as part of the Korean New Deal? A productive worker for Korea going forward for the next 50 years is going to be a happy, integrated one. Third is I would continue to press on diversity as a source of strength in not only in the U.S. and the European Union, but also, of course, in Korea. And finally, I would say that Korea's global profile depends critically on its regional status. So reaching out to India and other South Asian partners and Japan and other East Asian partners is going to be important, because if Korea is first tier in its neighborhood, it has a better chance of being first tier globally.
Well, Professor, that's all the time we have. Thank you for your time and expertise on this topic.
Thank you very much.
사람에 대한 투자들을 교육 격차, 문화 격차, 이런 노동격차들을 해소해 나가고 좁혀 나가는데 투자를 2.0에서 많이 해나가야 대한민국이 새로운 경제를 만들 수 있는 토대를 만드는 것이다 이렇게 생각을 하고 있습니다.
황급한 뉴딜 2.0에 머물지 않고 선도 국가를 향해 앞으로 나아갈 것입니다.
Professor Che, obviously we heard from Professor Bala and his perspective on the Korean New Deal, but as you're keenly aware, the Korean New Deal 2.0 has expanded or at least enhanced some of the original policies like the Digital New Deal and the Green New Deal. So with the Digital New Deal, there's a greater investment in the metaverse and cloud technologies. And for the Green New Deal, there's the target, as you mentioned before, of achieving carbon neutrality. Now, given that President Moon has less than a year in office, how feasible are these plans in terms of its implementation?
Well, that's a very good point. However, as I mentioned earlier, the Korean New Deal is designed to reflect the global changes and transition that all different countries are going through. The Korean New Deal strategically identified priority areas that Korean economy should be focusing on, such as green sector or digital area, and also a new driver of growth, such as biopharma or the new types of cars. And all those priorities would not be changed even after the Moon Jae-in administration. So from the beginning, it was designed to be more medium to longer term priority and national strategy, which actually the period is beyond President Moon's administration period. So I think unless there is a dramatic change in the global economy, I think the digital transformation and green technology will be a major priority for many other countries, including Korea. And the Korean New Deal's the importance and relevant remain even after the Moon Jae-in administration. Maybe the only change would be the evolution of the Korean New Deal to reflect the changing environment. And the Korean New Deal 2.0 actually shows how the Korean New Deal, the initial one, has been evolved over time.
I see. Well, of course, one of the interesting developments of the Korean New Deal 2.0 is the inclusion of this new pillar, the Human New Deal. Can you touch upon why this new policy was formulated and the reasons why it was brought about?
Well, like last year, we have the global recession, global economic recession caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And it actually increased the inequality in Korean economy, and the number of jobs were reduced significantly. So initially, when we started the Korean New Deal, it was more about boosting economy by investing in a certain strategic sector. But now we have to worry more about the social safety nets and then the ways to reduce the growing inequality in Korea. So the Korean New Deal includes the Human New Deal pillar, which aim to investing in the human capital and also increasing the social safety net, and at the same time reducing inequality by promoting the youth or the vulnerable people and helping their educations and then helping their savings and then supporting subsidizing their housing and then education as a human capital investment.
Right. So now, as you refer to helping the youth, the Human New Deal appears to be targeting, of course, the younger generation. So as a university professor who regularly deals with, of course, and engages young people, do you think that the government's Human New Deal policies will actually resolve the challenges that the young people are facing today?
Well, I don't think it would resolve all of the challenges the young people face today, but it will certainly resolve some of them. I think the current young people, not only in Korea, but also in many other countries, are lost generation. They will have a less opportunity to get a job or having a good job and having a higher employment status compared to other generation because they start their economic activity during the global economic crisis caused by the pandemic. So they face greater challenge of getting a job and also at the same time accumulating assets from the salary income, and also because of the high liquidity in global market, the real estate price has been even much higher than before. So it's much less affordable for the young people to have a high quality life anymore. So I think the Korean New Deal, particularly the human New Deal pillar, is designed to specifically help those youth who are affected by the COVID pandemic. For instance, it will help the younger generation and those students to increase the period of pay back their student loan, and it will also help them to accumulating their saving by the government matching the saving funds to the young people, and also it increase the employment package and also increasing the education for the younger people. It addressed some of the issues related to employment and housing and saving, which is a very important part of the young people's concern about today's economy.
Right. Well, as you know, the size of the investment into the Korean New Deal has expanded immensely. It has also been reported that there's going to be a state-backed New Deal fund, which will be additionally launched for people to actually invest in. So as an economist, how do you evaluate these projects based on the current status of the Korean economy in the aftermath of COVID-19?
Well, the aftermath of COVID-19, there's two specific characteristics all global economy share. First, the economic recession. So the fiscal expansionary policy by the government is required for many other countries. So U.S. has provided a large fiscal expansionary packages. Many European countries the same, and like many Asian countries have done the same. So Korea is one of them, which provide huge fiscal expansionary packages, which is a Korean New Deal. So such packages is necessary for Korea to recover from the economic crisis. So that's the first characteristic about the fiscal package like Korean New Deal. The second characteristic is really a lot of the liquidity in global financial market. So as we mentioned earlier, the stock market price is almost a record high globally, and the real estate price in Korea, particularly Seoul metropolitan or other bigger city, is a real problem. So the New Deal Fund was created to redirect this private-led investment from speculative investment into more productive investment by allowing them to invest in the New Deal Fund, which will help the government and then the companies to invest in the green and digital sectors instead of investing more in the real estate market. So I think this New Deal Fund, this participatory New Deal Fund was very helpful and also even successful. It was oversubscribed even last year. So the government is planning to expand and adding more New Deal funds that people can invest in.
I see. Well, Professor Che, here's our final question before we wrap up the program. It has been said that President Moon Jae-in has been involved in the details in the New Deal programs. He is said to have designed and expanded them. So from your perspective, what efforts should the South Korean government make in order to make this initiative successful going forward?
Well, I think there are a number of things the South Korean government is currently doing. One example is making regulatory reforms. So investing in digital and green sector is one thing, but that's necessary but not sufficient condition for those sectors actually to grow and succeed. So the government need to revise a lot of legislations or sometimes create new legislations to help those sectors to grow. That's one thing. And another thing is strengthening the social safety net even more. So we are talking about the universal employment benefit, or more universal social insurance. So a lot of the social package and social safety net need to be expanded its coverage and then help more poor people. Government is currently working on it, but the government can put more effort on those areas.
Right. Professor Chair, that's all the time we have. Thank you for coming in and sharing your knowledge and insights with us.
Thank you very much.
With the announcement of the upgraded Korean New Deal initiative, there is mounting expectation that this will inspire and drive South Korea's future growth and prosperity. The hope is that this will be a catalyst for an inclusive and sustainable future for South Korea. That's all we have for you this hour. Do join us again at the same time next week for a brand new episode of The Point. Thank you for watching.